The first plane built solely to hunt at night carried a radar dish in its nose. When it appeared over Europe in 1944, German bomber crews panicked. They couldn't see it on approach, only the flash of cannons and the glow of tracers ripping through their formations. Painted glossy black, the American P-61 Black Widow could find a target in total darkness and strike before a single searchlight locked on. How did this unseen predator turn Germany's night sky into a killing ground? By 1940, the Luftwaffe had turned Europe's night sky into its own hunting ground. German bombers roamed over London and Liverpool under darkness, guided by radio beams, slipping through anti-aircraft fire almost untouched. Searchlights crisscrossed blacked-out cities. Gun crews fired blind at shadows. Every night, raid exposed the same problem. The Allies had no fighter that could find, fix, and destroy a target after sunset. British night fighters were little more than day aircraft, with crude radar bolted on. Slow, unstable, and often as dangerous to their crews as to the enemy. Across the Atlantic, the US Army Air Forces faced the same dilemma. The coming invasion of Europe would depend on keeping bombers and ports safe from nocturnal attack, but nothing in their hangars could stalk enemy bombers once the sun went down. Commanders saw the toll rising. Luftwaffe night raids were burning factories, sinking ships at anchor, and breaking civilian morale. The technological edge Germany had built in peacetime, integrated radar, disciplined night fighter crews, dedicated training, gave it an unbroken string of successes. Allied planners tried everything. Ground-based radar stations gave early warning, but couldn't vector fighters fast enough. Beaufighters and Havocs were pressed into night duty, but lacked the speed and climb to catch Heinkels or Ju-88s at altitude. Even when they did, primitive radar sets forced pilots to fly nearly blind, homing on a faint blip while their prey escaped. Pilots spoke of hunting ghosts and chasing echoes. The stakes were clear. Without a true night predator, Allied cities would remain vulnerable, bomber losses would mount, and any invasion timetable would slip. What the Allies needed was not an adapted day fighter, but something conceived from the start as a nocturnal hunter, an aircraft with eyes of its own, and claws heavy enough to bring down even the toughest enemy bomber. Inside Northrop's design offices in California, engineers began sketching something unprecedented. A twin-boom aircraft built around a radar dish, painted black, carrying cannons instead of machine guns, with 3 crew members working like a single organism in the dark. If it worked, it would flip the night war on its head. But at this moment, in the winter of 1940-41, the idea existed only on paper. German bomber crews still owned the night. Allied cities still burned under moonlight. And no one on either side yet understood that a black, glossy shape was about to appear over Europe. One that would see through darkness and turn the hunter into the hunted. Inside Northrop's modest plant at Hawthorne, California, a handful of engineers were quietly drafting a weapon no one had ever seen. A purpose-built night fighter. Jack Northrop had a reputation for bold structures and unconventional layouts, and when the US Army Air Forces issued a requirement for an aircraft to hunt in darkness, he pushed for something audacious. Rather than adapt a day fighter, he proposed a 3-crew, twin-boom machine built around a dedicated radar. At first, the idea met resistance. Army planners balked at its size. A wingspan nearly 66 feet, a length approaching 50 feet, a combat weight heavier than most bombers. Critics called it too big, too slow, too complicated. But Northrop and his lead designer Vladimir Pavleka argued the opposite. Size was needed for fuel, radar, and heavy guns. In their blueprint, radar was not an afterthought, but the aircraft's heart. A 30-inch SCR 720 dish spinning inside a pointed nose, sweeping 5 miles of sky with each revolution. The crew concept was equally radical. Up front, the pilot, above and behind, a gunner controlling a remote turret. And in the rear cockpit, a radar operator staring into a glowing scope, guiding the hunt with whispered course corrections. Red lights preserved night vision. Intercoms linked all 3 stations. It was less like flying a fighter, and more like running a submarine through the sky. Northrop's prototype rolled out in May 1942, painted olive drab and carrying only the outline of its future weapons. Even on its first taxi tests, its tricycle landing gear and massive flaps hinted at a design built for blacked-out runways and long patrols. When the P-61 lifted off for the first time that May afternoon, its two Pratt & Whitney R2800 engines growled at 2,000 horsepower each, pushing the huge frame into the clouds with surprising agility. Test pilots described it as a black cat with wings, steady, powerful, and eerily quiet for its size. While skeptics focused on its bulk, engineers focused on its teeth. Under its belly, 4 20mm Hispano cannons waited to be installed, each capable of shredding a bomber in seconds. Above, a remotely operated turret of 4.5 zero-caliber Brownings promised 360-degree coverage. Nothing in the Luftwaffe's night arsenal carried such a combination of firepower and sensors. As prototypes refined their systems through 1943, paint crews experimented with finishes. Tests in Florida pitted olive drab, flat black, and glossy black against searchlights. The winner was clear. Under beams of light, the gloss black disappeared first, slipping past 80% of detections. From that point on, every production P-61 would leave the factory in deep black, polished to a sheen. To the Army Air Forces, this gamble represented the only realistic path to owning the night. To Luftwaffe intelligence, still cataloging Allied fighters by silhouette and daylight performance, it was invisible. The Black Widow was taking shape behind closed hangar doors, built not just as another airplane, but as a system, radar, guns, and crew working together to flip the night war upside down. Every line of the P-61 Black Widow silhouette told a story about its purpose: stalk, ambush, and annihilate at night. Its twin-boom layout wasn't a stylistic flourish. It separated the engines and tail to create a clear field of fire for its heavy cannons and remote turret. Its deep central nacelle housed 3 men, radar screens, and enough fuel to patrol over enemy territory for hours. Unlike converted day fighters with bolted-on radar sets, the P-61 had been designed from scratch as a nocturnal hunter. At the nose, the SCR-720 radar spun silently inside a pointed radome. This was cutting-edge microwave technology, sweeping the sky out to 5 miles and locking onto targets in pitch black or cloud. The radar operator could track an enemy bomber's bearing, range, and altitude, calling course corrections to the pilot as they closed. By the time a German crew realized they were being shadowed, the Black Widow was already sliding into firing position. Firepower was equally intimidating. 4 20mm Hispano cannons sat in the belly, angled dead ahead for maximum punch. Above them, a remotely operated dorsal turret mounted 4.5 zero-caliber Brownings. The pilot could lock it forward to deliver 8 guns at once, or let the gunner traverse 360 degrees, creating a curtain of fire no bomber could survive. This combination of heavy cannon and flexible turret made the P-61 the most heavily armed night fighter of the war. Its power plants matched its teeth. 2 Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double Wasps delivered over 2,000 horsepower each, pushing the nearly 30,000-pound aircraft to 366 miles per hour at altitude and up to 426 miles per hour in a dive. With its tricycle landing gear and massive Fowler flaps, it could still land safely on blacked-out strips, a detail often overlooked but crucial for night operations. Its wings held 646 gallons of fuel, and with drop tanks, it could stay aloft for 8 hours or more. Even its finish was a weapon. Northrop's engineers proved in testing that a gloss black skin reflected searchlights away instead of scattering them. Under the beams of flak towers, the plane simply melted into the sky, its shape obscured, its radar signature softened by wood fairings and rounded edges. Crews called it flying shadow, and in practice it behaved like one. Inside, the cockpit glowed dim red, preserving night vision. Radar scopes pulsed with ghostly blips. The intercom linked pilot, gunner, and radar operator like a single organism. This teamwork let them stalk a target patiently, adjusting speed and altitude until the cannons lined up. While Luftwaffe pilots relied on visual cues and moonlight, Black Widow crews hunted with invisible eyes and claws. To German intelligence, the first P-61 photos looked improbable. Too big, too black, too bristling with guns to be real. Yet every feature of the design, radar nose, tricycle gear, three-man crew, heavy cannons, gloss finish, was the culmination of years of lessons from Britain's nighttime misery. It wasn't just another plane. It was a complete night warfare package that would soon rewrite the air battle over Europe. The first operational P-61s crossed the Atlantic in the spring of 1944, their black wings folded in the holds of Liberty ships and their radars still wrapped in protective canvas. In May, the 422nd Night Fighter Squadron received its first Black Widows at RAF Scorton in England. Crews spent weeks learning to trust their glowing scopes instead of their eyes, practicing silent intercepts over the North Sea, refining the choreography between pilot, gunner, and radar operator. By June, just as Allied troops stormed Normandy, the Black Widow was ready to hunt. Its baptism came against the buzz bombs. German Phi-1 flying bombs were roaring toward London at 400 miles per hour, too fast for many fighters to intercept, too small for flak to reliably hit. P-61 crews climbed at night, radar locked on the pilotless missiles, and unleashed streams of 20mm shells to detonate them over empty countryside. These kills didn't make headlines, but they proved the new plane worked. In its first month of operations, the Black Widow logged dozens of V-1 interceptions, saving lives and winning the trust of Allied commanders. Then came manned prey. Over France and the Low Countries, Luftwaffe night bombers tried to harass beachheads and supply lines under cover of darkness. The Black Widow stalked them like a predator in an aquarium, sliding in unseen while German pilots stared at empty skies. In one encounter near Paris, a radar operator guided his pilot to within 100 yards of a Ju-88. A 3-second burst from the belly cannons turned the bomber into a rolling fireball before its crew even saw their attacker. Word spread quickly through German channels. Pilots radioed panicked warnings about a black twin boom with no lights and impossible firepower. Searchlight crews claimed they could hear engines but never find the plane. At night fighter bases from Brussels to Hanover, briefing officers warned their crews to break and dive at the first sight of tracers, a quiet acknowledgement that this new American intruder held every advantage. For P-61 crews, these first kills felt surreal. After years of night fighting as guesswork, they were now predators with an unblinking electronic eye. Radar operators spoke of hunting shadows, and then suddenly watching their screen fill with an enemy bomber dead ahead. Pilots marveled at the stability of the big plane in firing passes. Gunners tested the turret's rotation against fleeing targets and found it flawless. By August, the Black Widow had its reputation. It was no longer an experiment or a supplement to British night fighters, but a force of its own. Over Normandy, over Antwerp, over the Siegfried Line, it began to erode the Luftwaffe's last advantage, the night itself. The first combat reports sent back to the US painted the same picture. The German night war was cracking, and at the heart of it was a 3-man crew in a black plane that no one could see coming. By the autumn of 1944, the Black Widow had shifted from a rumor to a force that was reshaping night operations. Luftwaffe bomber crews, who once cruised across the channel unmolested, were now filing reports of unseen attackers. German intelligence memos spoke of a black twin-boom fighter equipped with radar, urging commanders to vary altitude, zigzag routes, and deploy chaff. Yet none of these measures closed the gap. Northrop's night fighter had given the Allies what the Germans had enjoyed for 4 years, an integrated system. Radar in the nose, cannons under the belly, turret overhead, and a crew acting as a single hunting pack. While the Luftwaffe relied on ground controllers and beams of light, the Black Widow carried its own sensors, slipping past flak and picking off bombers at will. In France, Black Widows began orbiting airfields at dusk, waiting for German night fighters to return low on fuel. The kill zone flipped from the channel to the runway itself. Allied commanders exploited this new power. Orders went out for offensive night sweeps, sending P-61s ahead of bomber streams to break up intercept formations before they reached their targets. In some sectors, crews were told to ignore strict escort duty and go hunting, destroying Ju-88s, He-177s, and Me-410 as they formed up. The shift was immediate. German pilots who had timed their attacks for the moment Allied escorts peeled off now found themselves pursued before they even reached altitude. The Black Widow's impact wasn't confined to Europe. In the Pacific, it began patrolling the vast gaps between islands, intercepting Japanese bombers that thought darkness gave them cover. Squadrons such as the 418th quickly built reputations for radar-guided kills, logging multiple victories on a single sortie and earning a nickname among Japanese crews, the Invisible Killer. Inside Luftwaffe command posts, the doctrine reversal was visible in the language of orders. Night fighters were instructed to avoid slashing attacks on black aircraft and to disengage if radar contact was lost. Crews were warned to expect interception anywhere, at any altitude, without visual cues. This was a quiet surrender. A recognition that a purpose-built night predator had ended the German monopoly on darkness. For Allied airmen, the change was palpable. What had been a defensive struggle became a confident offensive. Bomber crews slept easier knowing a radar-equipped Guardian prowled the sky above. Black Widow crews, once viewed as experimental, now formed the backbone of nocturnal air superiority. In less than a year, the night over Europe had flipped from German hunting ground to Allied domain, and the shift in doctrine left Germany scrambling to adapt to a threat it had never anticipated. By late 1944, the P-61 had become more than a machine. In Luftwaffe canteens and radio rooms, the Black Widow was whispered about like a phantom. Crews who had flown dozens of raids across the channel without incident now returned with bullet holes stitched across their wings and stories of invisible hunters. Some described being hit before they knew anything was behind them. Others saw only muzzle flashes in the night before their instruments went dead. The phrase "Black Ghost" began circulating among bomber crews, a grudging nickname for an opponent they could not see but could feel closing in. For German pilots, the psychological weight was crushing. Night missions that had once felt like safe passages now resembled ambushes. Radar operators in Ju-80s reported a strange spike of interference seconds before cannon shells ripped through their fuselages. Survivors spoke of a glossy shadow pacing them at the edge of vision, silent until the kill. The Luftwaffe had built its identity on mastery of the night. Now its own pilots hesitated to fly after dark. On the ground, searchlight and flak crews faced their own fears. Tests showed the P-61's gloss black paint reflected beams away, making it vanish under their arcs. Spotters strained their ears for the Double Wasp's low growl, but found only silence until tracers erupted. More and more batteries opened fire at ghosts or hesitated until it was too late, eroding the entire defensive network. Meanwhile, American crews thrived on the aura. Black Widow pilots wrote home about the surreal feeling of sneaking up unseen on enemy bombers. The radar operator's calm voice counting down range while the gunner swiveled his turret into position. Confidence soared. The aircraft's size, once mocked as too large, now inspired trust. Plenty of fuel, heavy armor, a platform steady enough to fire like a gunship in the dark. Each successful intercept reinforced the sense that the night now belonged to them. Even Japanese reports from the Pacific echoed the same tone. Bombers approaching Saipan or Morotai at night described sudden losses to radar fighters and black planes with no lights. Crews who had once exploited moonless skies for cover found themselves hunted instead. For the first time, the Allies had a weapon that turned darkness from a shield into a trap, and its reputation spread faster than its kill count. By early 1945, the Black Widow's psychological effect was measurable. Luftwaffe bomber losses at night skyrocketed. Mission planners shortened routes or cancelled sorties. Morale sagged as veteran pilots were lost and replacements refused to fly without escorts. In a war built on technology and terror, the P-61 had done both. It had introduced a new technology and turned it into a weapon of fear. By the spring of 1945, The Black Widow had completed its transformation from experimental giant to undisputed ruler of the night sky. Over Europe and the Pacific, its kill sheets told the same story. Bomber losses collapsing under relentless intercepts, enemy pilots abandoning night raids, and supply lines moving only under heavy cloud, or not at all. Squadrons such as the 418th and 421st logged victories so consistently that their call signs became shorthand for doom among German crews. The statistics were startling. P-61s were credited with 127 confirmed aerial kills, including 18 V-1 flying bombs, while sustaining remarkably low combat losses. In August 1945, a Black Widow named Lady in the Dark claimed the final aerial victory of World War II without firing a shot, hounding a Japanese fighter into the ground under relentless radar tracking. This quiet kill, closing out the war exactly as the plane had fought it, unseen, relentless, inevitable, became a fitting epitaph. But the Black Widow's influence didn't end with VJ Day. With its rugged frame, powerful engines, and built-in radar, it became the testbed for Operation Thunderstorm, the first project to fly directly into thunderstorms to study lightning, turbulence, and hail. Over 3 years, P-61 crews penetrated more than 1,000 storms, gathering data that shaped modern weather radar and aviation safety. The same design that had terrified bomber crews proved it could survive nature's own fury. Inside the new U.S. Air Force, Northrop's night fighter set the template for all-weather interceptors. The F-89 Scorpion, and later Cold War jets, borrowed its 3-crew layout, its nose-mounted radar philosophy, and its heavy armament. The idea that a fighter could find its prey electronically, beyond visual range, was no longer science fiction, but doctrine. A direct inheritance from the glossy black shadow that had ruled the wartime night. For German veterans, the memory lingered as an opponent without face or warning. Many admitted in post-war interviews that the fear of being stalked unseen was worse than the actual combat. For American crews, the Black Widow became a symbol of technological audacity, the moment when radar, teamwork, and sheer firepower turned darkness into a battlefield they could dominate. Painted like the night it owned, the P-61 Black Widow proved that even in total darkness, the hunter can become the hunted. If you enjoyed this look at the Black Widow's legend, hit subscribe and tell us which aircraft you want next. Your idea could be our next deep dive.